Welcome back to the 2024 Destination Wedding Giveaway. Currently, voting is open for where the engagement shoot will take place. While we are waiting to see where you, the viewers, choose to hold the engagement shoot, I wanted to introduce you to our wonderful filmmaker, Carter R. Madsen. Hi, Carter. How are you doing today?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Tanya. It's good to be here.
Yeah, we always love working with you. Tell me a little bit about your company.
Okay, so my company is very simple, right? I make wedding videos. At the end of the day, you could boil it down to that, right? But to be real with you, I love making them, right? I have been doing wedding videos for years, have not gotten tired of them in the slightest. Every individual couple's story and every individual couple's just sort of the way that they are, the way that they interact with each other, getting to capture that on camera and put that into a story told through the medium of video is a real privilege.
That's so fabulous. I can tell you're passionate about what you do. And it sounds like what you're doing is you're telling that story of that special day for the client. Great.
Yeah.
So when a client actually calls you, what are some things that you need to know from the client in order to determine, like, are you the right fit?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tanya. In your interview that you did with Morgan, she talked a lot about some of these things, and a lot of them carry over to me as well, right? Photography and videography, despite being different disciplines, they share a lot in terms of what's required of them on a wedding day. And it's, to your point, they share a whole lot in terms of what needs to match between the vendor and the couple in order for that to be a good working relationship, right? So Morgan, one of her first points was she talked about how important it is that the couple and the vendor get along really well, just in terms of their personality, right? She mentioned that photographers, and in my case, this also applies to video, are going to spend more time around the couple, possibly even than they'll spend with their significant other, right? Because we are usually with the couple from getting ready to send off, right? Whereas in some cases they can be together for getting ready, right? I've had that happen, it's great.
Right. In
most cases they're not, right? And since we take up more of that time. So that's definitely critical, right? You got to get along with your photographer. In my case, you got to get along with your videographer. And if you're on a call with them and you can tell that you're vibing, you're having a great time together, that is a really, really good sign, right? In my opinion, one of the things that is most important, I think, is style, right? And Morgan did touch on this a little bit, but with video, there are enough differences that I'd like to highlight this between video and photography styles. One of them is just how the footage looks, right? If you're watching through a wedding video or you're watching through a clip on Instagram, for example, you get a pretty good idea pretty quickly of what the footage looks like, right? Yeah. Some videographers are going to really seek out the most dramatic stuff that they can, right? And that is not my style. It's not to say that that's a bad style at all, right? That is, when it's done well, it's beautiful, right? But that's not how I personally choose to shoot my wedding videos, right? In my case, I go for a little bit softer of a look, right? I try to sort of even things out a little bit more, stay away from the harsher light, right? So that it looks very even, very soft, very pretty. Does that make sense?
Yeah, more natural it sounds
like.
Yes,
more natural and less dramatic,
yeah.
Right? There's a place for it, but I tend to, that place is not my style. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Your style is giving them the reality of that day, what it really looks like.
Yeah, To your point, actually, you bring up a really good point, which is the video more sort of, I don't want to say forced, that's the wrong word. Is the video more created or is it more captured, right?
Right.
Some couples, and this is totally okay, right? Whenever I talk about my style versus someone else's style, I don't want to put down the other style, right? It's just simply not how I do things.
It's what the client likes.
Exactly,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are some videographers and some couples who will work together to create these pieces of art that are created, right? They go in and the videographer almost approaches it like a movie set, right?
Yep.
And it's all very carefully designed, very carefully manicured in order to create a very specific created vibe for the couple,
Yep.
right? They're getting model shots here and model shots there, all this stuff. That is great for the couples who want it, right?
Yep.
As for myself, I tend to prefer some things that are a little bit more naturally captured, right? You might refer to it as documentary style, right? I like to take things as they come And there are a couple times if I've got a minute and I'm working with getting details on, the couple's wedding rings or something like that, I'll lay them out, make them look nice, right?
Of course, yeah.
But most of the time, what I prefer and what you can tell if you just sort of watch my videos, I love to find the little moments in between and sort of put those in as they naturally happen, right? The stuff that I haven't manufactured, that I haven't created, but that I love all the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Like that natural kiss that wasn't expected, that natural moment where they look at each other, or maybe the parents look at each other, because it's that moment of like, our child is getting married.
Exactly. Stuff like that is that's my bread and butter, right? I love putting that into my films.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and to that point, right, if a couple likes that kind of thing, we should talk, right? Give me a call.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, as well as that, one of the things that I think is most important is matching up just the style of the video, right? There are some wedding videos, like we talked about earlier, that are very dramatic, very sort of in-your-face, movie trailer-esque, right? And for the couples who want that, that is awesome. I tend to go a little more middle of the road, right? Because there's movie trailer on one side, and then there's very soft and easy on the other side. I tend to go somewhere in the middle, right? Because I love how emotions are able to be conveyed when you combine a couple's vows, their parents' speeches, all the little moments that happen through the day, like combining that all and playing with that and orchestrating it to music, you can really just push and pull emotions through a video. And that sort of orchestration and watching that all kind of come together is beautiful to me, right? So I love to have that emotion, right? I love to sort of have that ebb and flow of it, just in limited quantities, right? Because in my opinion, a wedding day should be emotional, but not dramatic. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. You feel those emotions and those senses that someday, 50 years from now, you're going to look back at and remember, like, I felt that.
Yes.
The video is portraying what I felt. So
That's
when you're
the
watching
keyword.
it with your maybe great grandkids or maybe nieces and nephews, if you're choosing not to have children, you are able to feel those moments still.
Yeah, the keyword is feel, right? Because, I don't know, in my opinion, video allows you, no hate to Morgan, right? I love Morgan. Right. I love photographers in general. I love photography. Yeah. But video allows you to feel how an event or a wedding day or anything felt much more than just a simple picture, right? It's a much more immersive experience. So the word feel is key.
Yeah, I think, every vendor has a role at a wedding. So that photographer has a role because that's that beautiful photo that you're going to hang on your wall. And again, people 50 years from now are going to say, wow, your dress is so beautiful. Or, I can tell you were married in the 80s, whatever it is, right? But then the video adds the music and it adds the feeling. And maybe there's a voiceover of a little piece of the ceremony that was just like that special touch, that special moment. Yeah. No, that all makes perfect sense. That's great. So tell me, how does someone tell that a videographer is a good videographer? There's so many different ones out there. And again, not, as you talked about, not knocking any vendors, because there are so many wonderful vendors and they fit different people and different, genres and different looks, as you've talked about. But I guess really, when someone calls you, how do they know like you are the right fit for them?
That's a great question. So to your first question, I like to think that there are, in terms of just good and bad videographers, I don't think that there are any, right? I think that there are good videographers and bad videographers for a specific couple, right? Sure. Because if a couple, for example, let's say that there is a videographer who, maybe lacks a couple of technical proficiencies in one area, but if that lines up really well with the couple's tastes, right? Let's say, for example, I've heard that some people who shoot a little bit lighter and a little bit brighter, I've heard them criticized by people who shoot a bit on the moodier and dramatic side for their choice in shots, right? I've heard it said, oh, they don't know how to expose, it's too bright. Where that's not empirically true, because there are still couples who like that look, right? So there are only good and bad videographers for a specific couple, right? Yeah. And to your point, what we were talking about earlier with, do you like how their footage looks? Do you like how their videos make you feel? And most importantly, do you get along with that videographer? That's the most important thing for couples to consider, right? Footage quality, how the video feels, do you get along with the person?
Yeah, that's great. I love those tips. That's a really important tip for the viewers. If they're looking right now to book a videographer, those are some things that they definitely should think through. Yep, that's wonderful. For sure. Do you have an area or maybe type of venue that you love to shoot in, or maybe a terrain that you love to shoot?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I am very much an outdoorsy guy, right?
Yeah.
Love going outside, love going for hikes. I love to experience just the beauty of nature that the world has to offer, right? That has taken me a lot to the mountains in a lot of instances, right? So I am partial to shooting weddings there as well. It doesn't hurt that we're all here based out of Salt Lake City, right? We have the mountains right at our doorstep, and it's kind of hard not to fall in love with them, right?
Right.
I will admit I've become a little bit partial to shooting out there, right? I love going there. I love going to work there. So I'll never say no to going out to the mountains, but really anywhere that nature is just sort of allowed to shine its beauty forth, right? Whether that be on a beach, on some mountains by the coast, on some mountains in the Rockies, I'll take it.
Yep, that's great. And those terrains always bring some really interesting, aspects to a wedding or any kind of event, because you might be in the mountains and you think it's a beautiful clear day, and all of a sudden you have a pop-up thunderstorm.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Or you're on the ocean front and all of a sudden the waves are so loud that for the video you're having to think through that, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Always considerations to be made.
Always considerations. So what do you do when some of those things happen? Like, let's say you are on the beach and all of a sudden the waves are a little bit loud and you need to make sure that you get that recording of the couple. What are some things you do?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Tanya, especially with that situation that you mentioned with the waves. There are some things that we as wedding videographers just can't control, right? And that's going to be one of them. So if that happens, in that specific situation, that's one of those things. There's an old adage in the video production world, which is fix it in post, right?
Yep.
And that's one of those things where I'm just going to need to go in after the fact and try to trim down that background noise while still letting the vocals shine through, right? And I won't go into all that, all the steps on that. It's a process.
Right, but there's a workaround.
There's a workaround,
Yep.
right? There are some things, for example, if we're working on a first look, right? Let's say we're working on a first look and some wind comes up. Either we can wait for a second to see if that can die down, or if it's more than waiting for, 15, 30 seconds, maybe if there's a place, if the couple's looking to do their first look in a place where there are a couple of options right around, right? Like if there are different pockets of the same area that we could go to, I'll check those, right? But for me, the key in those moments is really just finding a solution that makes sure that I can get what I need while not being intrusive on the wedding day, right? Like if it were, if a light breeze popped up right before we were going to do the first look, I would much rather just walk over to the groom, pop a little wind cap on the microphone, and then walk back, rather than saying, hey, there's a place in sort of the wind shadow of this building 10 minutes away, let's go there, right? That's intrusive. Putting a little wind cap on, that's a quick and easy fix, right? On a wedding day, going back to what we talked about with me trying to be very documentary, sort of capturing it as it happens, I would rather just come up with the quickest fix rather than what might be considered technically the best fix. Because if the technically best fix is, hey, let's wait for the tide to go out for 3 hours, so that the wave noise dies down, or let's walk 15 minutes over here, right? Like that's untenable, right? I don't want to mess with the wedding day, so I will come up with a quick fix that lets me get what I need while not interrupting the flow of the day.
Yeah, and it lets it be an authentic day too.
Yes, exactly.
And I love that about a wedding. I wish I could control the weather. I wish I could do it back voiceover later on. Yeah, there's many times where I was like, oh, I wish I had that power. If anyone knows how to give that to me, please let me know.
Give us a call.
Give us a call. That's wonderful. Anything else that you want to share with us?
I can't think of anything that I do. I feel like we have covered some of the most important points, right? In my philosophy of covering weddings, right, that very much sort of let it happen as it happens approach, I feel like if a couple and a videographer, if they both decide that they're going to work well together, sort of on those criteria we discussed earlier, they're going to have a great time.
Yeah, videographer and photographer teams make the day wonderful and spectacular when they work well together, when they are in sync together, and when the couple definitely is in love with them, because those intimate moments are what they're capturing and those last a lifetime.
Yep.
So tell me what your services cost, or what a client should expect to pay on average for a good filmmaker.
Got it, yeah. So as far as what a client should expect to pay, that boils down to a couple of different things, right? Probably number one for some couples is going to be budget, right? If they're planning a wedding that's on them, a little bit on the lower budget side, right? If that's one of their main constraints, that's totally okay. And they can look for someone who's a little bit newer in the business, right? As far as what my rates go for, they can vary pretty widely, right? That depends on a lot of factors, which we can go into those. One of them is definitely going to be where the wedding is, right? If I'm doing a wedding local to Utah, right, sleep in my own bed the day before and the night of the wedding, I just drive up for the day, come back. That's going to be a lot less expensive than a wedding that I would need to fly to, for example, right? A wedding somewhere, maybe on the East Coast, maybe out of country, something like that, right? But let's just go off of sort of here in Utah for an example, right? What an average couple could maybe expect to spend for a wedding video is probably somewhere in the $5,000 to $7,000 range, right? There are packages that I offer that go a little bit lower if a couple's on a budget, and then if the couple sort of wants the whole, if you will, the whole shebang, right? If they want everything I can give them, then maybe it'll go a little bit higher.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, and then one of the things to consider with me, the way that I do it, is I sort of offer a base and then offer couples the option to add things on, right? Some people will offer sort of a tiered package system. That's totally fine. I prefer to let the couples be a little bit pickier and choosier with what they want and what they don't, right? For example, my base package is I'll show up, I'll film your wedding, it'll be great, I'll stay there for the whole day, right? I'll bring my second shooter, it'll be a party, and I'll get you about a 5 to 6 minute highlight film at the end of it, right?
Yep, that's perfect.
Some couples, what a lot of them will choose to do is they'll choose to get a full-length recording of their ceremony front to back, right? So I will, in addition to that highlight, they can add on, I'll cut through the angles that I have running on the ceremony, and we'll get them a full-length video of that, right? Sometimes couples want that same thing, but of the speeches that are given at the reception, right? Sometimes couples want, for example, if they're doing kind of a wedding weekend type of deal, we can add on a rehearsal dinner, we can add on additional activities. I like to keep it very open-ended in terms of what my pricing and packages look like, just so that I can accommodate exactly what a couple needs without trying to shoehorn in things that they don't necessarily want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. It sounds to me, and talking to a lot of the vendors and, working with a lot of the vendors, that there are a lot of open-end budget questions because really you're trying to figure out what is right for the client and telling the right story for the client.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. I think that's a great way to look at it.
Well, thank you.
As a videographer, are there certain rules that you need to keep in mind when considering where you're shooting? So maybe like if you're shooting in Mexico, are there different rules than maybe in Utah?
Yes, there definitely are. And it's honestly very country dependent, right? That's one of those things that I, as the videographer, I'm just going to do my research beforehand and make sure that I'm kind of up to speed on what all those things are, right? For example, I believe it's Mexico. I would have to double check, but I'm fairly certain it's Mexico. There are regulations that state that only native Mexicans are allowed to be drone pilots on professional productions, right? In that instance, I would leave my drone at home, right?
Right.
And if the couple was insistent that they wanted drone footage at their wedding, we could talk about alternatives, right? I could talk about finding a local pilot to come in and get me some footage.
Yep.
We could talk through our options, right?
Yep.
But that is something that needs to be watched out for. I've heard of other examples of countries where if people are coming in, they either need to have a visa, or I've heard of some examples where some countries won't let you bring in more than 2 camera bodies.
Right.
So in those instances, again, that's just stuff you're going to have to find a workaround for, right? And that's not the couple's responsibility to find, right? That's for me to figure out as the videographer, how can I make sure that I'm getting them the best possible product despite any regulations that might be standing between me and that product. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And it's great that you made a comment that I love, which is that is not the couple's responsibility. I think sometimes, and that I love and work with so many different vendors as a planner, but when vendors make it simple for the couple, it makes everyone's life easier. And so I love the fact that you stated that is my responsibility. If they want a drone, as long as we can fly a drone in a country, right, then it's my responsibility to figure out how that's going to happen. That's fabulous. I love that.
Well, thank you. I feel like it goes along with some of the other things that I've said. I hate to bother people, right? Whether that's on a wedding day, and where we talked about, sort of creating things rather than letting them happen. And, with this of I don't want to bother them and just say, hey, sorry, can't do that. And then just leave it at that, right? I don't want to be that problem. So I always want to go into it with the solutions first type of mindset, right? How can here is the problem, here's what we can do about that problem.
Yep. So. Yeah. Well, and it also, I think sometimes when negative reports come out about vendors and professionals, it's like, oh, well, they added a fee on. And sometimes it's because they haven't thought of those solutions up front, or they haven't said, okay, you know what? this is all included in my price package, and so I need to figure out how to make it happen. And of course, if you know the rules up front and you have that conversation with the client up front, then that's great, right? Or if they're adding something, that's a different story. But that's, I think, sometimes what gives wedding professionals a bad name is when we don't know the information that we need to know beforehand.
Yeah, and just like you said, you know, despite our best efforts and our best research as wedding professionals, it may come that we show up somewhere and things are different to how we expected them to be, right? Yeah. And that's just sort of the way that things are, right? In some places, you know, where information just isn't quite as readily accessible, I feel like I would actually be interested to hear from you on that. Like, what is, I guess, how would you handle that, right? I feel like I would take the approach of, it's still not the couple's problem, right? Like, it's always my problem, not their problem. I would love, can I turn this around on you and just sort of ask you, like, have you run into stuff like that before? Is that something that you had to deal with?
Yeah, it's absolutely something I've had to deal with before. And I look at it in a couple of different ways. So if it's information that I did have and I presented it to the couple and the couple chose to skirt the issue or have tried to skirt the issue, then of course it is really the couple's issue at that point because they knew the information and I knew I provided the information to them. If it's something that, you know, I was negligent on or I couldn't get the accurate information, then it definitely is something that it's on me. I need to figure out how to make that work. And I definitely have had that happen before. We had a situation where we were at a resort and the resort never told me that if the videographer did not stay on site, that they couldn't film on site.
Oh no, really?
Yeah, and so when they showed up on site, there was a charge for it. And to this day, that couple never knows that because it was a negligent issue, if you will. It was just more ignorance of anything that the resort did not tell me. But at the same point, in the day of, I'm not going to go to the couple and say, oh, by the way, here's a new charge that you knew nothing about because I'm the planner. It's my responsibility to make sure they have the information. Now, if I had shared that information with them and they had chosen to try to skirt the issue, whole different story. Like, hey, remember that email and your videographer's on site? So I'm sorry, but there's a room charge or whatever we need to do to make that happen. So really it's dependent on where the source of the information lies.
Makes total sense.
Yes, but there are a lot of times in the moment where you don't want to ruin the couple's day. That's the worst thing that possibly could happen. Yeah. So as a planner, of course, we try to get as much information up front. We also try to share as much information as possible with the vendor. So drones is a great issue.
Yeah.
We definitely will figure out the information for a various country and say, okay, here is the information you need to know that you can or cannot fly a drone. And sometimes we're having those conversations before our clients are even talking to someone and interviewing them so that they know, here's where we're headed. If you have not filmed here before, here's the rules.
Yeah. No, that's really great of you guys.
Carter, thank you again so much for all of the fabulous information. I am so excited to see where the engagement photos are going to be taking place.
Me too.
Yeah, so
Excited to see what Morgan comes up with for those.
Yeah.
She's spectacular, so I'm sure they'll be amazing.
for you, the viewer, remember, the voting is open for the photo engagement location. And again, those locations are Yosemite National Park, Arches National Park, and Tibble Fork Reservoir. You can vote on Destination Inspiration's Instagram account. The link is in our comments below. To vote on the engagement location, go to Destination Inspiration's Instagram account. The link is in the comments below. Remember to subscribe to our page and receive alerts when new videos are out. And remember, vote for the engagement location by July 20th.